A German historian, pictured here, recently revealed that the Associated Press news agency had cooperated with the Nazi Party by not undermining the strength of Hitler and the Third Reich. In turn, they remained the only Western news agency with access to the totalitarian regime. So this historian's name is Harriet Scharnberg. She works for Halle's Martin Luther University, and she released in an article in Studies in Contemporary History, she released a lot of information, a little bit damning against AP, and she maintains that AP maintained access by entering into a mutually beneficial cooperation with the Nazi regime. So they basically were able to cede control under something called an editor's law by promising to not produce anything that was calculated to weaken the strength of the Reich abroad or at home. So at the same time that the deal enabled the West to kind of peek into the repressive society, at the same time the question is at what cost? Because as a matter of fact, they required the Nazi regime required reporters to be hired from the propaganda division, and as a matter of fact, the Nazis would use some photos from the AP photo archives for their own anti-Semitic propaganda literature, such as for the subhuman, the Jews in LA. So they would be using archival footage from AP for their own means. So according to Scharnberg, though, what she has to say is, even though, yes, you want to have some access to the regime, she had this to say. She said, to that extent, it's fair to say that these pictures played their part in disguising the true character of the war led by the Germans. Which events were made visible and which remained invisible in AP's supply of pictures followed German interests and the German narrative of the war. So I'd like to know what you have to say about this, especially considering the Associated Press is sort of touted as being very objective and very just direct, and they're on the first line of everything going on. What do you think about that?
I think that the Associated Press, I really appreciate the information. I've used them as a source for years in this work. They're the go-to source for information, and they are seen as being very objective, very unbiased. They're typically first with information. Mm-hmm. They have an image treasure trove like you wouldn't believe. Mm-hmm. And it's not surprising that you would see reporters trade for access to information and photographs. Certain, how do I put this delicately? If they want the information and they're about collecting information, they're about collecting imagery, they're about collecting what's really happening, it doesn't really offend the sensibility that they would cooperate in order to get the information. Now, they pulled the images once this historian brought it to light that this in fact happened. They immediately removed these images.
Right, exactly.
Which says, you know what, maybe we crossed the line.
It's clearly some kind of embarrassment, to say the least, for them. So to just give you an idea as well, so within a year of the rise of the Nazis, The Guardian was banned from having a bureau there, so in 1935, and then, by 1935, even bigger British-American agencies were banned from having access. So they really were the only ones there.
The eyes and ears on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. So I could totally understand why you would have to maybe work within that to at least maintain access, but at the same time, it gets really problematic if, they're staying on well until the United States joined the war in 1941, and up until that point, a lot of the information, some would argue, but a lot of the information is maybe skewed, especially if these pictures and documents are being handpicked by Hitler, basically.
I was going to say, what we know is that Hitler actually handpicked a lot of these, which is really telling.
And as you said, AP did pull a lot of the images that that had been previously taken by propaganda journalists, but an AP spokesperson had this to say with regards to the investigation. They said, as we continue to research this matter, AP rejects any notion that it deliberately collaborated with the Nazi regime. An accurate characterization is that the AP and other foreign news organizations were subjected to intense pressure from the Nazi regime from the year of Hitler's coming to power in 1932 until the AP's expulsion from Germany in 1941. AP management resisted the pressure while working to gather accurate, vital, and objective news in a dark and dangerous time. So yeah, it really does kind of toe this line between, access is important, but at what cost?
I appreciate what the AP spokesperson said. It makes sense, Joya.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we see now, as we're approaching the AP's 170th anniversary upcoming in May, there's actually a little bit more criticism coming forth with regards to the fact that since January of 2012, AP has become the first Western news agency to open a bureau in North Korea, sort of bringing back these ideas of like, what is your relationship with these regimes? have you learned your lesson from history? Are you actually going to maintain an objective standpoint, or is it going to be kind of more of the same? As a matter of fact, Nate Thayer, who he was a former AP correspondent based in Cambodia, he's actually a little bit cynical or pessimistic about it. He has this to say. He says, it looks like AP have learned very little from their own history. To claim, as the agency does, that North Korea does not control their output is ludicrous. There's naturally an argument that any access to secretive states is important, but at the end of the day, it matters whether you tell your readers that what you are reporting is based on independent and neutral sources. So I think, to me, this is very important in the sense that we see how important it is for media to maintain access, but also to maintain some kind of objective standpoint, and also expose these totalitarian regimes. We'll see how it plays out, but as I said, media is very important to expose or abet totalitarian regimes.